Florida has a reputation, and not just for the weather. For every story about alligators in swimming pools or someone doing something inexplicable at a Waffle House, there's something a lot darker sitting underneath all that sunshine. Missing people, unanswered questions. Cases that went cold and stayed that way, no matter how many investigators, journalists, or tip lines got involved. Some of these stories have been covered on national television. Some have been fought over in courtrooms for decades. And some are just sitting there, unresolved, waiting, with no answers in sight. These are 7 disturbing stories from Florida no one has solved. Story 7, Amy Bilig, Coconut Grove, 1974. On the afternoon of March 5th, 1974, 17-year-old Amy Bilig left her home in Coconut Grove, Miami, and started walking less than a mile to her father's art gallery on Commodore Plaza. She needed to borrow $2 from him so she could meet friends for lunch later in the day. She never made it. She was never seen again. Construction workers observed her hitchhiking at the corner of Poinciana Street and Main Highway in the early afternoon. That was the last confirmed sighting of Amy Bilig. Her father waited at the gallery. Her friends waited at the park. When she didn't come home by evening, her mother called a family friend who was a homicide detective with the Miami Police Department. He told them not to panic, that nearly all missing teenagers turned up safely. Call me in the morning if she hasn't come home. In the morning, Amy was still gone. What made March 5th, 1974, significant beyond Amy's disappearance is that it was Bike Week, the same day that the Outlaws and the Pagans, 2 of the most violent outlaw motorcycle clubs in the country, were traveling through Coconut Grove en route to Daytona Beach. Both gangs had documented histories of violence against women, including abduction and trafficking. Multiple independent tips directed Amy's family and investigators toward the motorcycle gang theory in the weeks following her disappearance. A family friend who had previously done legal work for the Outlaws arranged a meeting with 2 of the gang's members. They denied seeing Amy personally, but acknowledged that the abduction of young women had happened before within their circles. Amy's mother, Susan Bilig, spent the next 31 years of her life looking for her daughter. She crossed the country, visited biker encampments, followed leads into places most people wouldn't have entered alone, and consulted more psychics than she could probably count by the end. She also received harassing phone calls, beginning shortly after Amy's disappearance, from a man who claimed to be holding Amy captive and described in graphic detail how she was being abused. Those calls continued, off and on, for more than 20 years. The caller was eventually identified as Henry Johnson Blair, a U.S. Customs Department agent based in Miami. He was convicted in 1996 on 2 counts of misdemeanor stalking and sentenced to 2 years in prison. Susan won a $5 million civil judgment against him. She collected a fraction of it before he died. Blair always insisted he knew nothing about Amy's actual disappearance. A photograph from a roll of film found in Amy's camera, recovered near the Wildwood exit on the Florida Turnpike about 2 weeks after she vanished, roughly 250 miles north of Miami, showed a light-colored pickup truck in front of a wall with a vine growing up it. Police were never able to identify the truck, the wall, or whether the camera had been with Amy when she disappeared or had already separated from her before she did. A pagan member named Paul Branch reportedly told Susan in the late 1970s that Amy was alive and being held by gang members. According to Branch's widow, he recanted on his deathbed in the late 1990s and said instead that Amy had died of a drug overdose at a pagan party on the night of her disappearance, and that her body had been taken to the Everglades. Investigators believed the widow was fabricating or embellishing the story for financial gain, and the account was never corroborated. Pulitzer Prize-winning Miami Herald. Crime reporter Edna Buchanan, who covered the Bilig case for years, was skeptical of the biker gang theory. "The biker chicks grow older," she said. "They become mothers themselves. They develop consciences. A lone serial killer. I still adhere to that theory." Amy's father died of lung cancer in the early 1990s. Susan died in 2005 at the age of 80 without finding her daughter or an explanation. Her son Josh, who was 16 when Amy disappeared, has continued searching. Amy's name is etched into the family gravestone in a Miami memorial park with her date of birth and the date she vanished. No death date, because no one knows. Story 6, the freighter Frerieden, Port of Miami, December 1988. In December 1988, a freighter called the Frerieden left the port of Miami bound for Haiti. It was an 82-foot tramp freighter on a chartered voyage, with 9 people aboard. Among them was 23-year-old Lisa Bishop, a journalism student from Georgia who had arranged passage on the ship to write about economic conditions in Haiti. Bishop had recently met Florian Meyer-Borch, a German national working in Miami, who described himself as a ship captain, and it was through him that she arranged the voyage. Her family and friends were not enthusiastic about the plan. Borch was described by people who knew him as a drifter, unreliable, and someone who exaggerated his credentials. Bishop went anyway. Before the ship left port, she called her boyfriend. It was the last time anyone heard from her, or from anyone else on that vessel. The U.S. Coast Guard mounted a search. They found nothing: no ship, no wreckage, no bodies, no debris field. A vessel with 9 people aboard, departing from a major international port, simply disappeared. The case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries, which generated tips that went nowhere. No physical evidence of the Frerieden or its crew and passengers has ever been recovered. The explanations that get offered tend to be variations on a few themes. The ship sank in rough seas, though weather conditions at the time were not reported as unusually severe for that region. It was intercepted by pirates. The Caribbean corridor in the late 1980s was genuinely dangerous, with trafficking and smuggling operations working those waters with relative impunity. Some people have suggested the charter itself wasn't what it appeared to be. Investigators noted heavy speculation that Borch and a man named Felipe, who had actually chartered the Frerieden, may have been involved in smuggling, which would have made everyone on board a potential liability. None of these explanations has been confirmed because there is nothing to confirm anything against. No ship means no crime scene. No bodies means no forensic evidence. No wreckage means no timeline. Borch's background as an unreliable and possibly dishonest figure adds a layer of unease to the whole picture. But knowing a ship captain had a questionable history doesn't tell you what happened to the vessel he was captaining. 9 people left Miami on a boat in December 1988 and were never seen again. The water keeps its secrets better than anyone. Story 5. Zachary Bernhardt, Clearwater, September 11th, 2000. On the night of September 10th, 2000, Leah Hackett put her 8-year-old son, Zachary, to sleep in her bed at their apartment in the Savannah Trace complex on Drew Street in Clearwater, Florida. Over the next several hours, she watched television, chatted online, went for a walk, and took a swim in the apartment pool. She was a night shift worker, accustomed to being awake at odd hours, and this was her night off. When she came back to the apartment and checked the bed somewhere around 4 a.m., Zachary was gone. She called 911 at 4:47 a.m. Clearwater police responded with multiple units. Within hours, they had helicopters in the air, cadaver dogs on the ground, and volunteers searching the surrounding area. They found nothing: no child, no evidence of where he had gone, no indication of how he had gotten out or who might have taken him. Investigators determined from the start that this was a suspicious disappearance. An 8-year-old does not get up alone in the middle of the night, walk out of a ground floor apartment in an unlocked complex, and simply cease to exist. Police were openly skeptical of elements of Hackett's account. The timeline she provided was inconsistent in places, and she became a subject of significant community suspicion. But she was never charged with anything, and no evidence connected her to whatever happened to her son. In 2001, a neighbor at the complex named Kevin Jalbert was convicted on 60 counts of child pornography, attempted murder, and attempted kidnapping related to other crimes. During proceedings, he made statements referencing Zachary's building and implied he had taken a child from there. Police investigated those statements in detail. They found no physical evidence linking Jalbert to Zachary. His account changed with each telling, and the connection was never established to the standard required for charges. Also in 2001, a Polaroid photograph was found in a parking lot outside Boulder, Colorado, about 1,800 miles from Clearwater. The photograph appeared to show a young blonde boy bound at the wrists and ankles with duct tape. Police were unable to confirm or deny that the child in the photograph was Zachary Bernhardt. Over the more than 2 decades since his disappearance, investigators have followed leads into other states and into Mexico, where a man photographed in the Ocampo area bore a resemblance strong enough to his age progression photos to briefly restart public attention on the case. Someone out there knows something, and the hope I have is that someone would come forward and give us one piece of information that we need, said Clearwater Police Lieutenant Michael Wallach in 2020. Zachary Bernhardt holds the distinction of being the subject of Florida's longest-running active Amber Alert. He would be 32 years old today. His case remains open. Story 4. The Hog Trail. Murders and the Fort Myers 8, Charlotte and Lee Counties, 1994 to 2007. In February 1994, two hog hunters walking through scrubby woodland in Port Charlotte, Florida, noticed buzzards circling overhead. When they went to investigate, they found what remained of a man. He was nude, partially decomposed, and impossible to identify. Nobody had reported him missing. He became John Doe. It was the first of many. Over the next 2 years, more men turned up in remote wooded areas of Charlotte County, all male, all nude or partially clothed, several showing evidence of having been bound. The manner and location of the deaths were consistent enough that investigators concluded they were looking for a single offender with a specific and disturbing pattern of behavior. The clearest picture of what that offender did came from Stanley Burden, who survived. In August 1994, the same year the first body was found, a man who identified himself as Dan approached Burden in Fort Myers and offered him $120 to go into the woods for a bondage photo shoot. Burden, who needed money, agreed. Once in the trees, the man tied him to a tree and attempted to strangle him, using his foot against the tree trunk as leverage. He told Burden, "Why don't you die? Why don't you just give up and die?" Burden didn't. He freed himself and went to a hospital. 2 years later, when the Hog Trail Task Force connected Burden's assault to the pattern of deaths, Burden identified Daniel Owen Conahan Jr. from a photo lineup. Conahan was a licensed practical nurse who had graduated at the top of his class from a Charlotte County vocational program. He was a Navy veteran. He was, by professional appearance, unremarkable. A search of his home found rope, cameras, and other material. Fiber evidence from his car matched material found with victim Richard Montgomery's body. In 1999, Conahan was convicted of first-degree premeditated murder and sentenced to death. He has maintained his innocence in all other cases. He has been charged with exactly one murder. Investigators believe he committed at least 13, possibly 19. On March 23, 2007, 8 years after his conviction, a land surveyor in Fort Myers discovered 2 human skulls in a wooded area of Melaleuca trees. Cadaver dogs and forensic teams ultimately recovered 8 full sets of skeletal remains from the site. No clothing, no personal items, no evidence anyone had visited the site recently. Just 8 people in the ground. To find 8 bodies in one place, that's really bizarre, former FBI profiler John Douglas told NBC News. If you're in the business of killing people, that's a great disposal area. You've got the remoteness, the elements, the heat, the insects, animal predation. You put a body out there, and probably within a week or so, there's not going to be much left. The discovery was described by Florida authorities as the largest such excavation in state history. Of the Fort Myers 8, 4 have since been identified using DNA and forensic genealogy. As of the most recent reporting, 4 remain unidentified. Conahan has never been tried in connection with any of the 8 deaths. He sits on death row at Union Correctional Institution for 1 conviction. An unknown number of people who might otherwise be remembered by name are still waiting for someone to figure out who they were. Story 3. Felipe Santos and Terrence Williams, Naples, 2003 and 2004. On October 14, 2003, 23-year-old Felipe Santos, a Mexican national living in Immokalee, Florida, was driving to work with his 2 brothers when his car was involved in a minor fender bender near Airport Pulling Road in Naples. A Collier County Sheriff's deputy named Stephen Calkins responded. He cited Santos for reckless driving and driving without a license, put Santos in the back of his patrol car, and drove away. Santos's brothers waited at the scene. Santos's family went to the county jail to bail him out later that day. He had never been booked. He was not there. He has not been seen since. Calkins told investigators he had changed his mind about the arrest and dropped Santos off at a Circle K convenience store. No surveillance footage placed either man at the Circle K. No witnesses could confirm it. Santos had a fiancée and an infant daughter in Naples. He had family in Oaxaca, Mexico, who he supported financially. He had no reason to disappear and every reason to stay. 3 months later, on January 12, 2004, 27-year-old Terrence Williams went missing under circumstances that were, in the words of the investigators who eventually worked both cases together, almost impossible to call coincidental. Williams was pulled over near Naples Memorial Gardens Cemetery by the same deputy, Stephen Calkins. Cemetery workers watched Calkins put Williams in the back of his patrol car and drive away. 45 minutes to an hour later, Calkins returned to the cemetery alone and moved Williams's car from a parking space to the side of the road. He left the car keys on the ground beside it. Williams's family found the car through a tow yard. The tow order had been signed by Calkins. When the family pressed the sheriff's department for answers, Calkins' account shifted repeatedly. He first claimed to remember nothing. Later, he submitted a detailed incident report that contradicted the timeline established by cemetery workers and by his own phone records. There was no record of a call he claimed to have made. Surveillance footage from the Circle K, where he claimed to have dropped Williams, showed no sign of either man. Calkins was fired in August 2004 after an internal investigation concluded he had lied about his interaction with Terrence Williams. No criminal charges have ever been filed against him. He now lives in Iowa. Actor and filmmaker Tyler Perry became involved in the case after seeing a news report and offered a $200,000 reward for information. Attorney Benjamin Crump filed a civil wrongful death lawsuit on behalf of the Williams family. The suit was dismissed in 2021 after the legal team missed a filing deadline, and a Florida appellate court affirmed that dismissal in 2023. A federal investigation examined the cases as potential hate crimes. Santos was Latino, Williams was black, Calkins is white. It is my belief that they were killed because of their color, said Doug Malloy, former assistant U.S. attorney who led the multi-agency task force that investigated the disappearances as potential civil rights violations. Both men are still classified as missing and endangered by the Collier County Sheriff's Office. No remains have been found. No charges have been filed. In June 2025, human remains discovered in Naples were submitted for DNA analysis in connection with local unsolved cases, including those of Williams and Santos. As of this recording, results have not been publicly reported. Story 2: The Loxahatchee Bird Farm, June 1994. On June 5, 1994, a delivery driver named Daryl Crew arrived at a 5-acre exotic bird farm in Loxahatchee, Florida, to drop off animal feed. The farm was operated by Piguan Moses Lal and his aunt, Lilawati Lila Bueratan. The property housed more than 700 exotic birds, macaws, cockatoos, and other rare species, collectively valued at approximately $700,000. When Crew arrived, no one answered. He hopped the fence. The birds were there, alive and unfed. Lal, Bueratan, and their 2 hired workers, Daljit Hari Gobin and Roland Felix Ayum, were gone. Crew left the feed and returned the following day. The birds were still unfed, still alone. He contacted police. 4 people had vanished from a working active farm without apparent signs of struggle, without notifying anyone, and without taking anything that would indicate a planned departure. The animals, worth nearly $750,000, were left entirely behind. If this had been a planned exit, leaving the birds makes no sense. If it was something else, the lack of visible evidence at the scene was either very deliberate or very fast. A bird broker familiar with Lal received a call on June 7th from an unidentified man who claimed to have received some of Lal's animals from an African reptile trader as compensation for a deal that never came through. That same caller stated his belief that Lal had been murdered. The broker passed this information to police. The lead pointed toward the world of international exotic animal trading, a business that, even in the 1990s, moved significant sums of money through poorly regulated and sometimes criminal channels. The legal and illegal exotic animal trade often overlapped, and disputes over valuable inventory could turn violent. What no one has been able to establish is who came to that farm, what exactly happened there, where the 4 people went, or whether any of them are still alive. No bodies have ever been recovered. No one has ever been arrested. The identity of the man who called the bird broker has never been established. The broader network of contacts around Lawl's exotic animal operation was investigated and yielded nothing prosecutable. The farm, the birds, and whatever took place there on or before June 5, 1994 remain a genuinely open question. 4 people walked off a working property in Palm Beach County, and the ground swallowed them without leaving a trace that anyone has been able to follow. Story 1. Paula Sladewski, North Miami, January 2010. Paula Sladewski was 26 years old, visiting Miami from California with her boyfriend Kevin Klim for the New Year's weekend in 2010. They attended a Lady Gaga concert at the Fontainebleau on New Year's Eve and spent the following days moving through the South Beach Club circuit. On the early morning of January 3rd, they were at Club Space in downtown Miami. At some point before dawn, Klim and Sladewski argued inside the club. Klim was asked to leave by club staff. He took a cab back to their hotel and went to sleep. Sladewski stayed. Surveillance video captured her leaving Club Space at approximately 7:20 a.m. on January 3rd, 2010. Walking out behind her, close enough to be clearly visible on camera, was a man who has never been identified. Club staff told investigators a man had approached Sladewski outside the venue, spoken with her, and left with her. After that footage, there is nothing. No other confirmed camera captured her. No one came forward to say they saw her after 7:20 a.m. The last image of Paula Sladewski is grainy nightclub security footage. 14 hours later, a North Miami resident reported a fire coming from a dumpster on Northwest 14th Avenue and 130th Street, in an industrial area about 120 blocks north of Club Space, roughly 12 miles away. When firefighters responded, they found a woman's body burning inside the bin. The body was burned so severely that identification was only possible through dental records. It was Paula Sladewski. An autopsy concluded she had been strangled before her body was set on fire. Investigators' working theory is that she was killed somewhere else and transported to the dumpster. The location itself pointed toward specific knowledge. It was at the end of a dead-end street near a propane company, not a place someone would find by accident or know about without a connection to the area. It was out of the way. It wasn't highly traveled by people, said North Miami Police Commander Michael Gaudio, the lead detective on the case. It's a place you wouldn't know unless you lived or worked there. Klim was initially considered a person of interest, given the nature of his relationship with Sladewski. Her family and friends described it as volatile, and a past domestic incident had been reported. Investigators ultimately cleared him. Police released a sketch of the unidentified man seen leaving the club behind Sladewski, described as a heavy-set, black or Hispanic male with a goatee. No arrest was ever made. Gaudio, who spent years as lead detective on the case before his retirement, later said it was the one case from his career that stayed with him. "It's the one I didn't solve," he told CBS in 2020. "To be unable to give the family closure does bother me. I still think about it to this day." Paula Sladewski's sister, Kelly Ferris, has continued to speak publicly about the case. A $3,000 reward remains available for information. No charges have been filed. No one has been arrested. The man who followed her out of Club Space 15 years ago has never been identified. 7 cases spread across decades and geography. A teenager who vanished on a sunny Miami afternoon in 1974. 9 people on a ship that left a major port and never arrived. An 8-year-old taken from his bed in the middle of the night. A suspected serial killer convicted of 1 murder while believed responsible for nearly 20. 2 men who got into a deputy's patrol car and were never seen again. 4 people who disappeared from a farm full of birds worth nearly $1 million. A woman who left a nightclub on a Sunday morning and was found burning in a dumpster 14 hours later. What runs through all of them is the same hard fact. Somebody knows something, or knew something once, and that information either died with them or is still sitting with someone who hasn't come forward. Some of these cases are genuinely cold. The trail has been gone for decades, and barring a confession or new physical evidence, they may stay cold. Others are closer than they appear. Forensic genealogy has cracked open Jane Doe cases across the country in recent years, and DNA technology has solved things that seemed permanently beyond reach not long ago. Human remains found in Naples in 2025 are currently being tested in connection with the Santos and Williams disappearances. Technology moves forward even when investigations stall. There is also something worth saying about the people these cases tend to involve. Amy Bilig was 17 years old, hitchhiking on a residential street less than a mile from her father's office. Zachary Bernhardt was 8. Felipe Santos and Terrence Williams were young men of color who encountered a police officer and were never seen again. Paula Sladewski was at a nightclub on a holiday weekend. None of them were doing anything that should have led to what happened to them, and in most of these cases, the systems that exist to find answers have not produced them. Florida attracts people from everywhere, keeps some of them in ways they didn't intend, and its geography, swamp, ocean, dense subtropical forest, hundreds of miles of remote terrain, creates conditions where things can go wrong and stay wrong for an extremely long time. That's not the tourist brochure version, but it's the accurate one. If any of these cases resonated with you, if you knew something you hadn't thought about in years, or if you just want this kind of story to get more attention, hit the like button and subscribe. There's more Florida left to cover, and none of it is boring.